going.
I'm just adding a little welcome message to our new site. The idea is here that republish. They're coming to the site and we're just presenting them what they need to get started. So I'm going to clean up the left navigation while I'm at it. The conversations are nice. The OneNote is nice. Pages are nice. All of these things are great. But on day one, it's noise, and I really want to have less confusion for my users. And when they come to the site, I want them to see just what they need. So let's pause on the demo and let's go back into the slide deck. Oops, I closed that by accident. Give me 1 second. Apologies. There we go. So in this first demo, what did we do? We used Excel for data validation and to create the list. I didn't put the tool in front of the program, in front of the problem, excuse me. We used an Office 365 group as the user's new digital home. And that Office 365 group, and later in the demo, Power Automate, will be the glue that binds the solution together. We've removed the clutter from the SharePoint site to give the users the easiest possible access to their tools. And so we're using that simplicity of design when creating the solution to decrease the delivery time and increase the user adoption. So the next guiding value that I'd like to apply in these solution builds is to add value to our users through the centralization and automation of resources and solutions. And we'll do that by understanding the business process and try and find opportunities to add value. And then we'll create a hub for teamwork by creating those connected solutions. And we'll centralize in a place that works for our users.
And sorry, Norm, Sanjay, if you've got your hand up, I'm not sure if this is a good time to pause and ask your question.
Please do.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Norm, I know this the presentation is more about digital transformation, and I think we are going into the strategy. The main thing which I want to understand from your perspective, like when we design a strategy for a digital transformation, what are the main points we should focus on? Like when we are talking to the client, what are the main points do you think we should focus on? I know that may be a bigger thing, but like a general basic main points.
I believe it depends on the nature of the transformation. There's going to be large scale ones. Think of bringing online email to an organization for the first time, or bringing in OneDrive to an organization at the first time. You're talking enterprise, impactful, huge change management implications types of change. I'm finding that my niche area for SharePoint, Power Automate is in those smaller areas where they've been left behind. And so what we do is we try and take that person with the paper form who's doing like work orders and bill of materials on a sheet of paper, handing it to someone else who collates it on that same sheet of paper and then types it up into another web page. I'm trying to find those people to add value. So to do that, the basic thing that I start with is to understand the need. And then I know the tool. So what value do I understand in the tool that I can add to their existing business process? I don't want them to tell me what the absolute outcome or the route to success should be. I want them to say, this is the sequence of events that we do. It takes this many steps, this much time. And if I think I can do something that brings value and doesn't add work, then that's the basis for these smaller digital transformations. And that's the premise, and that's the basis for the ones that I do. But again, large scale enterprise change, that's a different story.
Okay, so we focus on quick wins and then go from there. I mean, in typical scenario.
And it depends. It depends on the organization.
Correct. Okay, gotcha.
Like if they're still running their email on Lotus Notes or something like that on premise, then it's a different conversation.
Yep.
But time and time again, I'm finding that small groups are more flexible. They're more willing to change. And you can bring value quickly without an overinvestment in technology, training, people, change management, and so on.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. One of the requirements that they had is that with their existing spreadsheet, they had no way of knowing what the current state of any one agreement is. So we will simply add a status column, and that will track the current state of it. That will either be active or expired. And we'll leverage this column throughout. Save that. Again, these changes to SharePoint Online, you may notice, like I've noticed in the last week, that the headers across the top, they seem to be more bold and stand out. The row columns, the title columns across the top are sticky now. I can create a column in between columns. I don't have to go into the list properties. Like, it's SharePoint Online is really becoming feature rich, and the investment is there, and you can clearly see it. And so I'm just going to update this data. A lot of people in Excel are used to these types of changes where I can come into a quick edit and just start updating my data. Business users love this approach. Okay, are you doing it? Active. Go off, save it. Drag and drop, there we go. And then we see on the left-hand side, it's starting to spin and resolve those changes. Easy stuff. It's a great way to get in there, start updating the data. Excuse me, I did that wrong. Get down there. Excellent. I'm going to just change one of these to expire just for an example, and then I can exit out, and all those data changes are there. The next thing that they wanted to do when we were talking about requirements is they wanted the ability to add owners to the different agreements. My screen, I'm just going to refresh it. Looks to be hung up a little bit. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to add an owner. And I'll make this a person column. Using a person column over a string column is of significance and importance, because it gives us so many opportunities to leverage that Active Directory information that we're inferring from the person column to use in Power Automate and elsewhere. You can dynamically grab the person's email address or their claims information or their manager, depending on how they have their directory set up. And so I see that I'm here. I'm going to click enter, let that resolve. And then I'm just, for the purposes of the example, going to backfill the rest of the list with my own information. We wouldn't do this in the real world, but it's for the purposes of the demo. I am able to update the data. We see the list is updating dynamically on the left. Since the last time I did this demo, which was a few days ago, the list view has changed. I'm seeing this this green vertical bar that is new to the list experience for me, and I'm going to exit out of there. So a lot of things that are new and changing. And again, just to reiterate, the investment from Microsoft is there inside of lists and SharePoint. Okay, total students. We can see that that is a simple calculation of inbound and outbound, but there's no intelligence behind it. It is simply a calculation that someone may have been doing using an Excel formula, but that doesn't necessarily translate when we move it up into the SharePoint list. So we'll delete this and recreate it to add that little bit of value so our users don't have to worry about it. And for this one, you do have to go into list settings. And I'm going to create a new column. And this is called total students. It's going to be a calculated column. And it's going to equal our inbound and outbound students. It's important to the university to have an idea of how many students come to the university to take the courses on Exchange and the ones that have gone out to get credit at other universities. So I've got this very simple Excel-like formula. It's a calculated column. I do have to make sure it's a number. And we'll say OK, and our new column will be available. And while I'm in here, I'm going to create another calculated column called balance. Balance was in the list that we imported, and it's a simple plus minus measure to show how many are out versus how many are in. The more they have out, the more money they make. So it's that type of thing. It's very simple. It adds a little bit of value to their business process, and it's a reflection of that. And again, simple formula, inbound minus outbound. This group is probably well aware of some of the more complicated calculated columns that you can do. This is, oh, I'm already using that, so I'll just call that new. That works. I haven't deleted the previous one yet, but that's easy enough to do. And it's an opportunity to show one of the other features that I quite like in Excel, excuse me, in SharePoint lists. And it's the ability to drag columns around inside of the view, and it actually takes. So I can click on my new column called total students, and I can drag that over here, and the view has been saved. I don't know if it happened so fast on the screen that you couldn't see it. So I don't have to go back and edit the view. It's just a couple steps that I would normally have to do, but it's taking care of it for me. And I'm just going to rename this. When I move the columns around inside of the view, it doesn't change the column ordering. You have to go into the list behind the scenes to do that. And so now we have calculated columns. It adds a bit of value to them. It also reflects the business process. The one thing that they didn't have in their existing list was the ability to keep each other informed and create notes. So we'll add a simple multi-line of text column called notes. And for me, one of the nicest things that I've seen come to SharePoint lists and libraries is the ability to update the default form. The default form that we see on the screen right now looks quite nice. It operates well, but there was always the need to either hide a column or add more logic to it. And in the cases where it needed more logic, or we had to hide something or rearrange something, I had to use Power Apps. And I'm okay with Power Apps, but it's a different user experience. It means a developer, a Power Platform developer has to get in and use it. With this, I can simply click Edit Form. I still have the option to use Power Apps, but I'm more interested in just moving some columns around. And so now I get this nice interface, and I can say that I want balance to be moved up. I want total students to be moved up. And at this point, I'm going to do one more move, and I'm not interested in signatory or duration, and I can just click Save. And so when my users come into that form for either a new or edit, they're still in the native form experience, but I've customized it to meet their needs. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So simple, but it adds that much more value to the users because they're empowered to do it. If I had to leave it to my users who've never seen or used Power Apps to customize a form, they probably never would. Value to the users.
That's cool, Norm. I didn't realize you could do that in Modern.
Yes, it's an ever-growing thing, and
it's much nicer than the old column ordering where you had to pick the right numbers to get things in the right order, and then you would see it afterwards and realize you did it wrong and do it again, repeat that a few times, and then get it right.
And if you're like me, you can't tell which one on the drop-down menus you're actually hitting in line, so you screw it up and you spend more time than you need to there. But it's just one of those things. It adds a bit of value, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we've edited the form. We've added columns that reflect the business processes or things that were missing in the business processes. And now they want some simple views, some simple ways of knowing what agreements are happening in what country. So yes, you could build a report, you could get into Power BI and all this other stuff, but for our purposes and our users, they would probably be much happier to stay within that SharePoint list. So we'll use a new view. I'll create a view. You know what, I'm going to do it a different way. Sorry about that. What I want to do is save this view, call it geography. Save that. And now I'm going to edit this. This is a classic SharePoint thing. We see this on-prem, we see it in the cloud, but we're going to group our data by the country column, and then we're going to further group it by city. We'll say OK to that. And so now, when the users of this exchange list come in and they're asked, how many schools do we have exchange programs with in Germany? They're able just to simply switch the view to geography, drill down into Germany, and see that they have them in Mannheim, Munich, and whatever the other one is that I can't pronounce, and get those details quickly without having to run an export to Excel and do lookups and other types of things. Just very simple, out of the box, no technical debt whatsoever with anything that we've built yet. Now, the next thing that they want to be able to do is to come into the list and quickly see which agreements have expired. So again, we're going to create another view to meet that need. I'm creating a view. I'm going to base it on all items. Call it expired. I'm going to go down to the filter, and I'm only going to show items where the status is equal to expired. That's odd. I thought I set one to expired already. I did not, excuse me. Let me change one status manually. There we go. And so now when they come in, what is this, some kind of joke? There we go. Damn refresh. So now they have a quick way of just clicking that expired view, and it will tell them where they really need to focus some of their efforts. And another thing, when they don't want to always come in and see this wide field of columns. And so we'll create one more view for them. And this will be more of their summary type view. And it'll only include the columns that they need in those situations where they need quick glance at information. And we're going to continue to build on this later in the demo. So in this case, they don't need notes. They don't need city, country. They do need to know about the counts. And with this simple view, they can consume more of that information more easily. And it's all good and well that we've added views and we've done some filtering and we've removed some columns and stuff, but there's much more potential and there's more opportunity within the SharePoint list to make it more usable for our users. So what we're going to do is use the view formatting features that have recently come to SharePoint Online. And so I'm going to go into my view and format the current view. I'm going to use conditional formatting. And I'm presented a formula. And I'm going to say if the status is equal to expired, we'll just make the text red to highlight it. Very Excel-like, but it has the benefit of a user coming in and being able to visually see at quick glance those areas within the business process that need the most attention. And we're going to do something similar for status. Status is a major driver within the business process. And in this case, we're going to use conditional formatting again. And I'm going to edit this rule. I'm going to get rid of the fill. I'm going to add more styles. And I'm going to say, you know what, I need to change edit the rule. if the status is expired, oops, get out of there. I'm going to format my text, no fill, more styles, and I'm going to turn that into red and bold and save it. And so now when I'm out of the summary view and I'm back into all items, I still have that status called out. It's bold, it's red, it draws the user to those areas where it's important for them to get information. And we're going to take this a step further, and we're going to look at the balance column. The balance column, negative is good for the users, plus is great for the users. So we're going to format this column again. Prior to this being delivered as an out-of-the-box feature, you had to use JSON column formatting. And if you're not a developer, it's intimidating. There are great samples on GitHub, but it can still be a pretty steep learning curve. So to have the availability to just configure is something that I think is powerful to users. So I'm going to do conditional formatting. And I'm going to edit the rule. I'm going to say if the balance is greater than 0, that I'm going to make it an up arrow with a green font. I'll just take that. And no fill. That's great. And now I'm going to add another rule that says, again, if balance is less than 0, again, no fill. Whoops. We're going to make that color red. We're going to make it a down arrow. We're going to save it. So now we're getting into this type of formatting that could almost serve as a very lightweight key performance indicator for the users to know where they're up and where they're down and where they need to focus their attention on status columns. And so, excuse me, the team is new to Office 365. They're new to SharePoint. We want to have the right amount of tools available to them when they come to the site. And one of the things that they said that they wanted was a new way of organizing and working better. And we'll accomplish that by using Planner. So outside of the demo, we've created a Planner group for them. And I'm simply taking the link from that, and I'm going to create a shortcut, if you will, over to that Planner group, Planner board, or whatever it's called. And I'm going to change the icon. And the intention here is to keep them in their new digital home and have the tools that they need in that site. As they are more comfortable with the tool sets that are available in Office 365, then they're able to do it. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing now that Sanjeev has the hand raised, so by all means, interject. Was there a question?
No, I think it might be the previous one. I'm
okay.
Not sure. Yeah.
And so I'm going to continue and try and bring more resources to them. And so one of the great things that's available from Microsoft right now that you can provision to online tenants is the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. This is an example of that site. So it's all of their curated content that they maintain that you're able to push into your site through web parts and deployments. And it's a great way to give them that help if they are interested in doing self-service help. And maybe not on their first day because they're all new to this, but we'll add this to our site as one of the tools that they can use. Again, it's not cluttering the desktop, it's not overwhelming them, but what we are doing is creating something for them as a foundation piece that they can use to grow on later. So republished.
Norm, I'm a big fan of learning pathways and the fact that not only can you trim down their curated content, but you can actually extend that and put your own content in there as well.
Oh, awesome. Great to hear that. And so here we are. Now let's jump back into this slide deck for a second. This does that. Sorry. Yep, I have. I cannot explain what's happening to my screen except to tell you that I'm on a older computer. I gave my Surface, my shiny new Surface laptop, went to one of the developers on my team, and I got his old Surface 4 Pro, and it has not been keeping up. So let me try that again. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. So what did we do in this second demo? We added new columns, we updated other columns, we created views, and we customized some of the filters in the views. So what I'm trying to show is that the guiding principle was I understood the business process and I found opportunities to add value. I added planner, I added the learning pathways. We're creating that hub for teamwork by connecting those solutions. And our digital home is centralized. It's not overwhelming, and it has just the options that our users need. So our guiding principle, we centralize in a place that will work for our users. It works for them today, and it still has the extensibility to work for them tomorrow when we get into, or they get into, excuse me, moving into something like Teams. And so here we are. This is where we really get to the meat of it. We're going to connect our users to technology by eliminating their mundane and manual tasks. And to do that, we're going to drive adoption through direct support. We're going to hook them with technology by making their working lives easier, and that will ultimately lead to increased adoption. And we're going to document our wins and advertise them so others can see what we've done. And so that they too can grab those opportunities for digital transformation. Let me just get those out of the way. Okay, am I going into Power Automate? So, like the learning pathways in the planner, I want to give our users an opportunity to get help directly from the team. And we'll do that by using Yammer. So outside of the demo, I've created a Yammer group, and I'll add that as another way of them getting access. And so Yammer is going through a lot of changes right now, but the thing of Yammer is that it still is a great way of building knowledge communities and having a low barrier method for your users to connect with you. And so as they ask their questions and you answer them and they're marked as answers, they build that foundation of knowledge, and it can be something that can serve as their own repository moving forward for knowledge and information, and it will reduce their dependency on you. So boom, now we have support directly to our team in the form of Yammer. And this is the new Yammer interface. If you've not experienced this before, it's quite nice. You see it in Outlook as well. It's a great way to do it. We've seen the learning pathways. The planner is a very simple planner board that will launch once it finishes authenticating. And so we've given them opportunities for support. We've given them opportunities to work in a more meaningful and organized way through Planner, and we've all done it from their home. We're not telling them to go out and explore the different areas that might exist. So now that the people part of it is there, we look towards the automation piece. So let me close up these extra windows. So I'm in my list. And did everyone notice that I'm using the expand content button? This is one of the things that my users ask for all the time, and they complain about the header space that you get with a site in the left nav site. So I'm clicking the expand content feature, and it takes away the left nav, it shrinks the top header, and you have more of that Excel experience that a lot of business users are used to using and are fond of. And from here, I'm going to start working on building my workflows. So I'm going to go into Automate. I'm going to go to Power Automate and then see my flows. Excuse me. I'm going to create a new flow, and it's going to be scheduled from blank. And all that means is I'm going to run on a timer. And this job will run every day at 10 a.m. We'll create that. Excuse me. So my timer's there. So the first thing that I want to do is to go back to my list and get all of those items that are expired. So to do that, I'll create a new action from SharePoint. Items. I'm just going to copy the site URL. I'll be going to that often. Please feel free to ask questions as we're going through the build. And so now at this point, it's going to take all of the items, but what I want to do is only get the ones where the end date is less than the current date today. So to do that, I'll use a filter query. Its end date is the column name, and the command is less than or LE, and then I'm going to do 2 single quotes, and I'm going to put the cursor back in the middle of those, and I'm going to use an expression. And I'm going to use UTC now. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to go inside of those. So I'm going to save, and I'm a big fan of adding a step and testing the step and go through that iterative process to make sure that I haven't messed something up at the top of the flow, only to debug it later. So we'll run that. We'll check to see if we have any items. Okay, that ran. Sorry, I'm going to test that again. Something odd happened there. I want to make sure that wasn't. Click to download. Okay, we got results. It doesn't normally do that, so I'm not sure what changed there, but that's fine. I think we're still good. The next thing that I'm going to do is to set that status to expired. And so I'm going to do another SharePoint step. But this time, I'm going to update items. I'm going to go back to my custom site. My list is Exchange. My ID comes from the previous output. And it knows that there could be more than one record, so it puts it into a loop container. And now I'm going to update my list, and I'm going to set the status to expired. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to test that. Now, there was a lot of talk of SharePoint 2010, 2013 workflows. Do the people in the meeting have much experience with Power Automate?
I'd say yes for me. I'm not sure the rest of the group.
Yes.
Okay, it's quite the tool. It can be awesome for simple types of activities, but I love the advanced capabilities that it's able to do. So we can see that it's gone through and it's expired a number of rows for us. So that's great. So that's the first part done. They need to know when things have expired. We've now accomplished that. So the next piece that we have to do is we need the ability to remind them when things are going to expire so they can proactively get ahead of things. So to do that, we'll send reminder emails 30 days out from the current date. So to do that, I need an anchor date, and I'll create a variable. And I'll just call this var reminder date. It will be a string. And the value will be another expression, and it will be add days. And we're going to use UTC now again. We're going to add 30 days. And then we're going to format it as year, month, day. Say okay to that. I'm going to test this again just to make sure I get the right date, and then I'll double check to make sure that I have this date that is going to be 30 days out from an expiry in the list for later in the testing. So I need a date of August 14th. So let me take a quick look, make sure I have one. August 14th. So that's my target test date for the University of South Australia. So we can continue with the build. And the next thing that we're going to do is another get items command, and it'll be filtered just like it was the one before, but this time we'll be using the end date. SharePoint get items. Keeps doing that to me. There we go. Custom value. That's not what I wanted. Sorry, bear with me. Got to get the site address again. There we go. Exchange. I'm going to do another OData filter. And it's going to be end date equal to EQ, and then my single quotes again, the var reminder date. I'm going to test to make sure that I get that one record back for the University of South Australia. Why are we getting output? I don't know why it keeps asking me to download. Normally you see that data presented. Yeah, that doesn't tell me anything. I'm not sure why it's doing that. This is new behavior. This click to download. Normally when I do this demo, I don't get that. So there's something different has happened in the last couple of days, but I believe that we're still good to go. So now that we have the University of South Australia targeted as an entry that is going to expire, we're simply going to send an email to our users. And we're going to use the dynamic content, and we're going to use the owner. And the owner was one of the new columns that we used, and we made sure to use that person data type. And when I said it would give us potential for further automation, this is what I meant. I don't need to store the email address. It's coming from Active Directory, so I'm simply putting in that it's the owner, and it gives me the attribute. And I'm just going to put in something very basic here. Reminder. What's the title? Expiring soon. And simply a link. You know, sky's the limit on formatting these emails, but for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to have something basic that proves and illustrates the point. We've added columns with the right data type for the end date. We're using the person column to know who it is. We're letting Power Automate find the connection between the two and then give them the heads up that something's done. So it looks like it's run successfully. And if I don't have an email, then it's because of that one get date that was not correct. And I don't see it, so that means there was. Just doing a refresh. So there is a problem with my get items that I need to take a quick look at. End date is equal to var reminder date. Var reminder date. Bear with me while I just check on something from the previous run. I want to make sure that var reminder date 2020 0814. 2020 0814 end date. Just going to double check that. What the heck? That's very odd. Are you guys seeing this? I don't know what language that is, but that is not my default. That is not my default tenant language. So something's going on, and it's not me.
The wonders of cloud-based demos.
You know what? I did this the other day. It worked fine. There's something else going on, so I'll have to look into that. But you have to believe me. You get an email based on this reminder date, and so it's to me it's yes. That whenever you demo something live, it kind of fails. But sending an email is not the least of the issues here. So here we are. It's almost been an hour. The hope was to do a full transformation inside of 50 minutes. So I went over, but that's fine. What we've done is we've taken a business process, and whenever I say that, there's real people behind there doing this real work, and it's manual and it's mundane. We've digitized their content, and we've created a central place for them to work. They have a SharePoint site that will unlock so many possibilities for modern document management and storage and collaboration into the future. They're using that Office 365 group, which is going to be future-proof for them in many years to come, and they'll be able to move to things like Microsoft Teams and expand on other technologies as they come along. And their mobility with this type of tool is amazing. And they come to this site and they see something that is minimal. It has quick access to everything they need. And this was the type of transformation that I performed in the past at the university, and it's been received quite well. And I find a lot of personal satisfaction because we can deliver value to our users in a low turnaround time, and we give them the foundation and the building blocks to future success in the cloud. So one last time, just us to into the slide deck to talk about things. And what did we do in this third demo? We added Yammer to provide direct support, and people help people, especially when they're coming to something as new as Microsoft 365. We used Power Automate to expire our agreements, and if the demo was working correctly, we would have sent an email saying a reminder is expiration is coming in 30 days, and that would have given them an opportunity to intervene in that expiration before the agreement expiration before it expired. And by doing that, we can hook our users with the technology. We make their working lives easier, and when we do that, we drive adoption. And I always do this. I always forget to show the solution showcase, but it's a website, it's a communication site, and it just shows them their wins, our wins, excuse me. Goodness me, I always forget this one. So my apologies. And solution showcase. This is something I picked up from another MVP at a SharePoint Saturday event in Ottawa, and they made a point of having this website that was just dedicated to the solutions, big and small, that they've made to share broadly with their community. And if someone was considering a move to SharePoint, they could come to this site, for example, and see that, hey, this is the Exchange agreement solution. And it's executive summary information that's being provided, one or two lines and some pictures to illustrate what the solution looks like, what they can expect, and the value that they can expect to get out of it. And there's something really, really important that we don't do in IT is to share our wins and to advertise them. And we should to get the credit that many of us deserve, but also to know what is realistic and possible for people out there. So when I close out these talks, I always like to ask people or let people know that if you want to know more about SharePoint and what's happening, learn the best practices, hear the latest news, get the trends directly from the SharePoint team, go to the SharePoint blog, listen to their podcast. That content is updated almost daily, and it's a plethora of information that comes. And if you're wanting to get inspired, you don't know where to start with SharePoint, you must go to the SharePoint Lookbook site. You can see all of the modern experiences. You can see those best-in-class demos that are available. You can read how they built them, what web parts they use, how they laid out their sites, and better yet, you can provision those samples into your own tenant. SharePoint Lookbook is an amazing place to start if you're new to this and you don't know where to go. Finally, one last call out for those wanting to get involved beyond the user group. There's the Microsoft 365 community docs. It's content for you, from people like us, and it's some of the best real information that you're going to get from community members. So finally, if you're so inclined to connect, find me on my blog site at normyoung.ca. We'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn at norm-young or on Twitter at stormin_30. And that, my friends, is that.
Awesome. Thanks, Norm. I love that closing idea on the solution showcase. I mean, we strive to do external facing case studies in a lot of the work we do with clients, but hadn't really thought about, how do we promote and champion it internal to the organization so that people realize, what, like you said, a little bit of, automation and integration there, and you can actually take a business process that's very manual and make it very much streamlined and much more visible to everybody from that point of view. That point of, okay, if this piece of paper lives on that desk, it's very much in a vacuum and nobody else can see what's happening with it. So that's cool.
I'll be right back. I'm losing my voice quickly here, and I need something refreshing.
No worries. Alcohol came out. We won't judge. I finished my wine, so I have to refresh. There we go.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. But really, I talk about this stuff, and it feels like it's so lightweight and it's so basic and it's so obvious, but
there's so much you can do with it. Yes.
There's so much you can do with it, and it really is a toolbox. It's a Swiss Army knife that's out there, and the real value that we bring, I think, is knowing how to use those tools to quickly bring value, and I hope if that's what I was able to showcase in the short time that I was here.
Cool. I don't know if you've played much with Logic Apps, which are kind of the foundational level underneath Power Automate.
I have not, because it's
actually the exact same designer. So you've got, for the most part, there's some exceptions. There's some things like approvals are a little richer in Power Automate than they are in Logic Apps. When you're in the designer view, it's actually the same designer with the same triggers and connectors and actions and things like that. It's fundamentally a different licensing model. So it's a consumption model rather than a per user licensing. So in certain scenarios, it can be a lot more cost effective to do Logic Apps, and it's a little more enterprise scale, in terms of packaging it and moving it between dev, test, production, to get into more enterprise type applications rather than citizen developer applications.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. We should chat, because actually we just launched a Logic Apps workflow solution for a fellow post-secondary institution here in Ontario around their recruiting process. So they use SAP from a recruiting process, but the whole reference letter checking process actually happens through Logic Apps. It sends emails, it tracks it all through SharePoint, it puts the documents back up in SAP afterwards. So yeah, taking those manual processes, and in their case, it was tens of thousands of letters that are going back and forth between people. You can imagine the effort involved in manually managing that, and throw a workflow around it. It's pretty cool what you can do.
Indeed. So our university is getting ready for the fall, and the fall is going to be the start of a new academic year, and for sure we're online for the fall term.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to getting people online, and we're not allowed to tell the academic side of the institution that thou shall use this tool. Like they have the academic freedom to choose what they're going to do. So some of them, a large majority of them, will use Microsoft Teams for their classroom delivery, especially for the ones that are less than 300. And they can be accommodated in a Teams meeting for that. They call it synchronous, which is just live, that live experience where the instructor is having their lecture or their lab or whatever the case is at a certain date at a certain time, and you're expected to be there, and we're talking interactively like we are now. So that's all good and well. The team self-service model is quite effective. Press a button, get a team. But what about that class roster? The academics they're paid to teach, but they're paid to disseminate information. They're not paid to keep site membership up to date. So Microsoft has this other tool inside of education tenants called School Data Sync, or SDS. And SDS will take data from their student information system, which is like a school-based ERP application, and it does all of the information tracking around admissions, recruitment records, and so on. Then it'll take that class roster information and translate it into membership within the team. So you have like essentially CSV files that you pump into this thing, and it'll have like the course name, the year, the term, the instructor, the students, and all that stuff, and it synchronizes it every day. And so this is an out-of-the-box offering, but it's an all-or-nothing deal with Microsoft, no surprise there. We're not going to provision 10,000 teams that will never get used. So we're creating our own opt-in model. And so in the opt-in model, you say, yes, I want it. We'll create a CSV and throw it over the fence, and it'll get provisioned. All great. But the one thing we don't know is when it's actually being provisioned. So right now, Peter, if you created a Teams team and you added any of us on the call to it, we would get an email saying we were added to the team. But you don't get that experience when Microsoft is provisioning for you. You just have to keep going back and checking. And again, the academics are not paid to go in and check teams or the existence of a Teams team every 5 minutes. So what we're doing is, and I bring this up because you're talking about the logic apps, is we've created Azure functions that are just checking the existence of things that we've provisioned. And if the Office 365 group is there, then we know like it's almost done. And then the Teams team provisioning, 24 hours later, it should be there. So we're just, we're creating polls to see if things existed, and when they do, fire that email off. And I kind of wish
it's not instant, particularly now. I mean, there's big warnings in the mid console saying, hey, it may take a while for this team to provision for you.
Exactly.
You need to build processes to deal with that. Sanjeev, go ahead with your question there.
Yeah, I have a weird scenario and a question actually, because most of my clients like at the large scale, maybe like 40,000 users worldwide, and the real challenge we have is when we go for any solution related to the Power Apps. The Power Apps is like if everyone has to have a license for the Power Apps, and that's a cost to the company. Am I right? Think about like 40,000 users. Even if it's a $5 extra, you are talking a lot of money here every
well,
month.
It depends the boundaries. I mean, if you can live within Microsoft 365, then there's licensing that's included as part of that. But as soon as you go outside of that, that's part of our argument to say, well, maybe think about Logic Apps versus Power Automate, Power Apps. There's a lot of models. Microsoft does not make this easy to figure the licensing out.
Exactly. And I really struggle in this scenario. As you said, it's not easy. So like creating a form in a Power App and a couple of like maybe 5 forms, and instead of creating a form in a classic SharePoint or a classic .NET application and host it into SharePoint somehow, there is no licensing cost, but still the people can use it. But the Power App, instead of using the forms, they end up having a license. They have to upgrade the license from E1 to E5.
Well, if you carefully build your Power App so it only talks to SharePoint, for example, then your Microsoft 365 licensing actually covers them for the Power App, and they don't need an additional license. If that Power App, say, talks to SAP, then you're into a enterprise connector, and yeah, you're into licensing. If you have Dynamics, then that has a different. It's a mess.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, that's that's the real problem. It's so complicated. It's very hard to, you know,
But
how do you
and
deal with the problem? Like that's my
I,
question.
well,
I actually did a
the
talk back earlier in the year on Power Platform licensing. It was more specific to Power Automate. I didn't get too deep into the Power App side of things, which is
Mhm.
looking at the models. They, to their credit, they have some simpler models. Like they say, look, if you don't want to deal with per user licensing for your Power Automate workflows, like what Norm was showing, and those do have enterprise connectors that require licensing, pay $100 a workflow, and we don't care if you've got 40,000 people coming in, you're covered.
Right.
So that becomes actually really cost effective at that.
Mhm. I got you. Yep, that makes sense.
and the fact that SharePoint is retiring InfoPath, and the migration is to the Power Platform and Power Apps.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to pull the rug out on the licensing front because of that. I believe Jeff Teeper has gone on the record saying that won't happen if you have SharePoint, the SharePoint list, and that's your data source essentially. It's essentially free under the Office 365 license, and you're not going to get double billed.
Yeah,
But again,
I imagine there's a big check that Jeff Teeper is writing to the Dynamics team, because it's actually Dynamics team that owns the Power Platform side of things. So there's I don't know how many billions of dollars internally from an accounting point of view at Microsoft that's going back and forth between the Microsoft 365 side and the Dynamics side. But yeah, Jeff Teeper's doing a good job of making sure we can use those tools as long as we stay in that SharePoint platform.
Yes, and who do you think has the most Power Apps entities? The SharePoint side or the Biz App side?
Yeah, I would put my money on the SharePoint side.
It is the SharePoint side. I heard that in a podcast yesterday, and so
Okay.
it's I'm not saying like we're bigger, we're better, and all that. It's not that at all. It's like two different entities really with the same name. Like most of their stuff is being served off of the common data service, and that is just something that we don't get in Office 365 with the default license, and that has such much more to it. So it's not fair to compare SharePoint list and what you can do with that in Power Platform, because that's just Canvas apps versus the CDS based stuff where now they're getting into model driven apps, and it's a whole different experience and interesting stuff. It's I wish the licensing wasn't as complicated, and I wish it wasn't as much of a barrier, because I really think there'd be some good offerings on both sides that could be easily integrated.
I mean, having said that, I have to admit, I'm not a huge Power Apps fan. I love Power Automate. I love Logic Apps on the workflow side of things. But I'll often go and recommend a Microsoft form instead of a Power App for a really simple form, because it's dead simple to create an entry-only form from that point of view. And if it gets more complicated, like we've got repeating tables and things like that InfoPath solved for us 10 or 20 years ago in an awkward way, but it did it. Power Apps is actually really awkward to do that kind of stuff. I'd say, you know what, just build an HTML form, get some jQuery out, and submit it to a Logic App or a Power Automate is kind of our preferred way of doing that. Because I find that as soon as you start to get something complex, a tool like Power Apps gets in the way and says, you know what, we're made for a citizen developer, but we're too complex for a citizen developer, but we're going to frustrate a pure developer because they know they can do so much more if Power Apps wasn't in the way there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. The real challenge is, even if we involve Microsoft Wrap, and their focus is to sell the license, so they tell their own story,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so there's a lot of options, and then there's a plethora of third-party add-ons out there as well. From Nintex is the one I know from a long time ago, but there's a lot of others that have come to market from a forms development point of view as alternatives there, because they recognize that there's a huge market there, and Power Apps isn't necessarily satisfying all of it. And I haven't seen anybody say, hey, we've got a tool that takes your InfoPath forms and turns them into new, responsive, modern Microsoft 365 forms. That's the market. I'm not saying we're building it. We're not, but somebody should.
I think there might be a community initiative to build some of those up.
I saw something community driven around InfoPath to Power Apps, but it was still pretty rough. I mean, that was a year or two ago that I saw it, and I haven't kept track to see where it's going. But yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there.
I don't think Power Apps is that old of a product.
It's I guess 4 years old or so now, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
I don't know if a 4-year-old product is considered mature or not. I really don't know.
When the product lifecycle is 3 weeks these days, it's hard to say what maturity is.
Exactly.
That is something.
I mean, it would be a V2 product in the old school Microsoft days of years gone by, because you would have only had 1 3-year cycle at it so far. But yeah, and it's not till V3 that it's considered a mature product. Today, that's hard to quantify.
And Norm, you mentioned about the Yammer and the team. So how do you think, like, how can we distinguish between Yammer and a Teams rollout in any organization? Like, what's the pros and cons, or maybe we are rolling out both, and how we direct organization use this and that based on.
Yep. That's a great question, and it's one that I know that I've and I think others, it's fair to say, have struggled with, and it comes down to the positioning of the tool like Yammer versus Team. There's so much either overlapping functionality or what seems like functionality that you almost need like someone directing traffic to know which app to use what and where. So the reason why I like to include or call out Yammer is, and I'm not trying to sound like a Microsoft sales guy, but it's a knowledge community. And what I mean by that is it's like a tech community, the Microsoft tech communities, where you can pose a question and get an answer. Like, that functionality exists, and it's also about communicating out official communication. So think of like your CEO of the company wants to make a large announcement. It's probably best if that is done through Yammer versus email, which can get buried and lost, versus Teams, which can be an explosion of activity and can cause people to be blind to it. So we position Yammer for official communications, and we also pose it for building knowledge communities, people helping others. And so within the Canadian education front, Microsoft maintains a very healthy Yammer community, and it's the Microsoft reps in education making announcements that are very relevant to us, and then us asking questions and getting answers, and then the ability to go back to that Yammer thing, search for a topic and see the Q&A, it's been marked as an official answer. That's a great positioning for Yammer. Knowledge building and official communications or employee engagement. Teams is different. Teams is that high velocity communication, chatting, conversations without flooding someone's inbox, plus the collaboration side that you get with file storage and adding in the tabs to bring in functionality to you. So Microsoft likes to call Teams the hub for teamwork, and every time I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, sales pitch. But really, that's what they're getting to. It's like, it's going to be the hub, and SharePoint's going to be a spoke, and Yammer's going to be a spoke, and Planner's going to be a spoke, and on the outside is going to be us consuming it. So I really think Teams is going to be the platform where we're using all of these tools, and it's going to be the delivery mechanism for a lot of this stuff. But I mean, the core stuff, right? Email, chat, storage, OneDrive, SharePoint, those things aren't going away, but bringing in all those other little value add things is where it is. So where do you position those things for a rollout? You have to identify what that tool is going to mean to the organization, and then direct the traffic and the usage towards it in that way. I don't know if you'd want to do that on day one, but eliminating the confusion around Yammer and Teams and email and when to use what and where, that's a good investment of your time and any organization's time. And it doesn't have to be this massive thing. a little infographic, a communication site with a page on there saying Yammer, announcements, Q&A, Teams, real-time, high-velocity communication conversations, email, people outside of the team.
Yeah, we like to actually create an infographic specific for each client to say what to use when, and we use fun scenarios to describe, is this a hey, let's go grab a bite to eat? Oh, that's a chat, versus hey, what's happening on this project? That's a channel conversation versus a company announcement versus we're talking to an external party. That's probably email. So, build those scenarios out and map them out. And they can be slightly different for different organizations. Some do or don't have Yammer, some do or don't have Teams. Everybody has email. Figure out what works for you and map that out for your organization.
Oh, correct. That's a great idea.
So yeah, I'd love to talk more. I think it's 8 o'clock. But you brought the point of the change management, like when you're creating a lot of things. And I have seen in my lot of engagements where we have a baby boomers versus the millenniums and the Z generation coming up into the organization. And it's a big, huge gap to teach everyone. Like, and it's really very hard to build a process in a change management to convince 3 generation actually.
Yep.
I would like to float a question to the forum, like how do you handle this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, change management is a big challenge and something you absolutely have to tackle. I mean, and it's not a one-time thing. Like Norm said, I mean, Microsoft 365 is coming fast and furious at you. It's changing all the time. So you need somebody in your organization that's watching that and understanding, okay, what training, education, communications do we have around that? But you're right. I mean, different generations have different styles, and you got to work through that.
Yeah, I've had the best success just helping people directly, and I dread it because I know the person is going to have me on speed dial, but
yeah,
the sooner you can.
Well, your goal should be to turn that person into a champion, and then
that's what I was going to say. That's exactly it. So you find the person, and they know going in that yes, I'm going to help you, but you're going to help me on the backside by advocating and helping the person beside you, and you just hope that there's some organic support that comes out of that, and then eventually, you slowly wean them off of that Yammer support group or direct emails or direct conversations, and they get self-sufficient, and then you forget about them and you go into the next one, and then a year later, when it's time to renew that business process, they're going to email you again, and those things are hard to get away with, but at the same time, they feel the comfort, right? They feel the comfort of knowing that you understand their needs and you do your best to reflect it, and their needs change all the time, right? Or their business processes change. So,
but getting those champions in the organization is a key part too. I mean, I'm a little anal myself. I mean, somebody sends me a chat message about a project, I say go into the channel in the Teams for it and talk to me there, and I'll respond. Email me a document attachment. Okay, go put it in SharePoint and then send me a Teams link to it. I mean, you need people that do that kind of push back and say, okay, I know that you're comfortable working this way, but there's a big advantage to working a new way in this modern workplace. And if you want to work with me, you got to do that way. So if you can get senior leadership in the organization to be some of those change champions, I know it's a challenge sometimes, that can be hugely impactful to the organization.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Totally. Yep.
One of the things that we've seen and we've experienced great success with is when we launched, when Teams was being adopted quite rapidly in March, when the whole university started working from home. And so they were like, we don't know where to start, what to do, how to do anything. So we were advocating for like a single post or a page or something, basically outlining the etiquette of what to do in the team. And I'm not talking about like, don't use all caps lock or don't urgent every message. We were just saying like, this channel is for communicating with this functional group, and this channel is for disseminating information for everything. And me giving you a thumbs up on a channel message to you isn't that is not for sentiment. It's not that I really like what you said. It's just to say, acknowledge, I got it. Don't message me again, or don't, little things like that. Like, you're in Teams, use this here, that there, and marshal the traffic to those areas, and that calms the noise down, and that eases adoption.
Get some fun examples. Like I use the one that, if you send me a vacation request saying you're taking 6 months off and I give you a thumbs up back, it doesn't mean you're good to go for 6 months. It means I saw it. And we're going to talk more about that later.
Yeah.
It's understanding that etiquette as an organization, and every organization can build their own etiquette of what those things mean. But they become really valuable. I mean, we've adopted the thumbs up as kind of a read receipt to say, yeah, I've seen it. I'll get back to you on that. All kind of just as one quick click there in Teams, and that works really well for us. So figure out what works for you, and try and build that organizational etiquette.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, that's for sure. There's no shortage of work in this front, I would say.
No.
That's true. That's why we are here.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Well, other questions, comments, feedback in general? No,
I will say, yeah, Norm, that was a really good presentation. We learned the core functionality as a developer. It's good to see the live demo and how other people are doing. It's a great learning actually. And thank you for that. Thank you for making this.
So 2 big physical thumbs up.
Yep. Yeah. Too big. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk. And I hope everyone's doing okay at home with what are we in, month 4 or 5 of being from home?
It's all a blur.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
It's blurry, yeah.
Cool. Well, Norm, thank you so much for presenting. That was a great talk. We've got a good chunk of it recorded, so we've got a YouTube channel under TSPUG, so we'll take the stream recording from Teams, we'll drop it up in there so people have access to that, and we'll go from there. Now, I'm not sure, we're kind of on the fence as to whether we're doing an August session or not. We don't have a speaker locked and loaded from that point of view. We sometimes take pause in the summer, so we may take that one off. I've thrown my hat in for September. I think somebody else has thrown their hat in for October, so we'll get the TSPUG site updated shortly and let people know, A, if something's going on in August, and B, what's coming up in the fall from there. My Teams just blanked out completely. Oh, there, it's back. Okay. Hopefully I was still coming through audio-wise through all of that. And thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks again, Norm, for presenting.
My pleasure. It's great to see everyone. Have a good end of the summer, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.